have to finally get this thing together. Fellow theorist and Celebrity Types contributor Boye Akinwande, along with Celebrity Types administrator Ryan Smith, in the members-only articles Determining Function Axes 4 and 5, discussed the common characteristics shared by extroverted sensation and extroverted thinking, introverted sensation and introverted thinking, etc. While my own thoughts on the relations diverge from theirs, I want to acknowledge the debt I owe to their original investigations into the topic, which have served as a foundation for my own thoughts here, and I highly recommend you check out those original articles in the members section of celebritytypes.com to compare with what I give in this video. One other point I'd like to make concerns a comment on my last video, which I posted in that video's description. Username From Behind the Board, in brief, was concerned that by setting up a hierarchy of objectivity among the functions, and by implying that certain functions rely on each other in order to operate, being in a relationship of interpreting raw material and needing both of those parts, all of this made it so extroverted sensation became essential for any function to operate, because in order for any of the less objective functions to obtain any data for interpretation, however limited, that data would have to pass through the entirely objective filter, which is what I implied it to be, extroverted sensation. In short, extroverted sensation was thus turned from a mental perspective on reality into a biological sense receptor. Bearing this in mind, I'd like to make this correction to that last video, that at least as far as this particular theory is concerned, which is more of me playing with ideas, I can't emphasize that enough, but all functions in this theory would draw from a pool of biologically collected data, and extroverted sensation is not, quote, purely objective, but is still interpretative, that is, still subjective, in that it is still emphasizing the elements of the data that are more bombastic, concretely interesting, visceral, and altogether representing the highest pitch of actuality as it defines it. And it is this form of empiricism which is technically, like all functions in the mind, some degree of subjective interpretative work. This fuels the far more subjectively contaminated analysis of introverted intuition, but being by no means functionally necessary for the apprehension of information to begin with, which means that extroverted intuition doesn't need it, it can just work with introverted sensation. This does not provide so clear of a necessary connection for the axis, however, but I don't have much of a better accommodation now because that's a very good point, and not that it's all that important anyway, it would have been really cool. Working off of the definitions given in the last video, we may then describe extroverted sensation and extroverted thinking as the extroverted empirical functions, which apprehend and evaluate respectively according to an objective external, quote, given. As a result, I associate them with the notion of manifestation because both are concerned with what simply is out there in reality. The one is concerned with understanding and perceiving it, the other with directing and organizing it. The one's most truly concerned with raw facts and data, with manifesting things in the real world, with getting real-world results and external feedback. Extroverted sensation is more like a photographer, or even an actor, you could say, because it seeks for the sharpest, most pure manifestation of reality in consciousness, on the stage of consciousness, seeking to become as in tune as possible with what's going on in the outside world. Very much like an actor, for instance, a Daniel Day-Lewis, who very much is trying to be as realistic as possible. Meanwhile, extroverted thinking is more like a stage director, or that kind of a supervisor who is arranging things and coordinating with the materials at hand so as to make their play manifest in the outside world, not in details, aesthetics, or appearance, so much as in the accomplishment of a specific logical goal. An individual to keep in mind here might be the philosopher Aristotle, insofar as he was very likely an ENTJ, with dominant extroverted thinking and sensory extroverted sensation, both of those together, and his entire philosophy could be viewed as an attempt to obtain the sharpest manifestation of the world, both in his perception and in his judgments and laws concerning the world. Introverted sensation and introverted thinking are the introverted empirical functions. They apprehend and evaluate according to what is subjectively, quote, given. That is, what is constellated in the subject after an experience, their impression of something. Introverted sensation is focused on simply apprehending these experiences, which is why it is described with the word impressionistic and is associated with memory, as well as tradition and procedure, because it remembers and records experiences in a subjectively vivid way that guides their actions in the future. Introverted thinking is similar but more active in this role, taking what is constellated in the subject and organizing it according to an internal logic. In both cases, what is happening is the subject is either apprehending or arranging what is made manifest within them. All of them are seeking for a manifestation of the given. But because in the case of SI and TI it is an internal manifestation, I prefer to call it a formulation instead of just a manifestation. Introverted sensation is more like a flowchart drawn by one with experience to show the tried and tested method for something, this flowchart that's been formulated over time. Introverted thinking is more like a mathematical proof, in that it's more active at showing the progression of judgments worked out within the mind. An individual I like to keep in mind here is the philosopher René Descartes, insofar as he was very likely INTP, with dominant introverted thinking and tertiary introverted sensation. His entire philosophy could be viewed as an attempt to provide internal justifications for things in the world and for his wholly personal experience of it via introverted sensation. Extroverted feeling and extroverted intuition are extroverted interpretative functions, apprehending and evaluating according to what they read into the objective, you could say, what they interpret of the objective. Thus, unlike SE and TE, which take the objective as it comes to them for what it is and on its own terms, FE and NI do not take it as it comes or on its own terms, but always look for something more, something beyond it, either just in terms of the connections that they can make with other things, or in terms of its tone and harmonization with other elements. Either way, they are conversational, that's the word that I'll use in this video, in that they open a dialogue of sorts with the objective world, redefining its boundaries constantly and expanding the data set, either through NE connections or FE human inclusiveness. And that's a word, by the way, specifically used by Akinwande to describe FE and NE. So yeah, I just totally stole that. That's why you should read the article. For both of them, NE and FE, they both seek to include more and more ideas, or else more and more values and concerns in their considerations of things. They want to get a bigger, better picture, even a more abstract picture in a lot of ways. They want more perspectives, more people accommodated for by their ideas and judgments. An individual I like to keep in mind here is the philosopher Socrates, insofar as he was very likely ENTP, with dominant extroverted intuition and tertiary extroverted feeling. His entire approach can be viewed as an active engagement, interrogation, and attempt to redefine people's beliefs and philosophies, to experience different perspectives, and to unite varied people to a common consensus on definitions. Finally, introverted feeling and introverted intuition are the introverted interpretative functions, apprehending and evaluating according to what they read into subjective experiences. The conversation and boundary play conducted by FE and NE occurs here as well, but towards the subjective experience of the objective stimuli. Hence, these functions can be described as transformative, insofar as they, quote, transform their experiences into meaningful data points for an overall conjecture or belief system. Another word you could use might be just plain interpretive, but I've used that so many times before and I don't think it quite captures all of the possibilities here. Introverted intuition analyzes and interprets the subject's experiences in order to find the truths that lie behind it, or the underlying meaning to it, and thus transfigures what would be an ordinary experience into further evidence for an overall theory. Introverted feeling does something similar, but in an evaluative way, not merely observing the experiences, but interpreting them in terms of their internal value system, determining their underlying goodness or badness, not immediately manifest on the surface. An individual I like to keep in mind here is the philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche. insofar as he was very likely INTJ, with dominant introverted intuition and tertiary introverted feeling. His notion of the will to power can be seen as an internal interpretation of people's seemingly ordinary actions, and his revealing them as having a value or a feeling tone quite different from what is superficially accepted by the general public. So I hope that you found this video interesting at the very least, or maybe inspire your own thoughts. If you have any questions, of course, leave them in the comment section below, and I'll try to get back to you in good time. And thank you very much for watching.